My name is April, and I'm 28 years old. I've always been the practical one in the family, unlike my older sister Eva, who's now 31. We couldn't be more different if we tried. Eva got married right after high school to a guy whose family had serious money. She moved to another state with him and quickly had 3 kids. She never worked a day in her life, instead living like some reality TV housewife with a maid and a babysitter handling all the actual work. Every time Eva visited our parents, and I happened to be there too, she'd look at my single status like it was some kind of disease. "April, when are you going to get yourself a husband?" she'd say with that condescending smile of hers. "The most important thing for a woman is to get married successfully. You're not getting any younger." I'd just roll my eyes. "Some of us have actual career goals, Eva." What always bothered me most was how Eva never helped our parents, despite all her apparent wealth. Not once did she offer them financial support, even though her husband supposedly made good money. I took a different path. After college, I worked my ass off climbing the corporate ladder. Within 2 years, I was making enough to buy my own apartment with a mortgage. The first thing I did when I got that promotion was call my parents. "Mom, Dad, I want to help you guys out financially," I said. After some back and forth, they reluctantly agreed to let me help with utility bills. I started sending them $600 every month, which was enough to cover everything. 4 years passed like this. I was building my career, paying off my mortgage, and helping my parents. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Then one day, everything changed with a single phone call. "April," came her voice through the phone, sounding oddly excited, "I have a surprise for you when you come over this weekend." "What kind of surprise?" I asked, immediately suspicious. "You'll see, I don't want to ruin it." That weekend, I drove to my parents' house like I normally did. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The place was in total chaos. There were toys scattered everywhere, unfamiliar suitcases in the hallway, and the sound of children shouting coming from upstairs. Standing in the living room, looking smug despite the circumstances, was Eva. Behind her was her husband, glued to his phone. 3 kids ran wild around them. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, looking between my sister and my visibly tired mother. Eva's face crumpled into a practiced sob. "Oh, April, it's awful. Richard's business went bankrupt, we lost everything. His parents wouldn't help us, can you believe it? They refused to save the business or let us stay with them. We had nowhere else to go." I stood there stunned. Something didn't add up. Her in-laws were loaded. They lived in a massive estate. Why would they turn their backs on their own son and grandchildren? "How long are you planning to stay here?" I asked directly. Eva wiped away invisible tears. "Just a couple of months, until we get back on our feet." I nodded, trying to stay calm. A couple of months sounded manageable. A week later, I drove to my parents' house for our usual Sunday dinner. I'd spent the morning baking a large apple pie as a peace offering. Things had been tense since Eva moved in, and I thought some comfort food might help. I parked in the driveway and noticed Richard's expensive car still had its custom rims. Funny how those didn't get sold before they came begging to my parents. "Hello," I called out as I entered, balancing the pie in one hand. My mother was on a stepladder in the living room, struggling with some new curtains. Eva and Richard were sprawled on the couch watching some reality show, neither making any move to help. "Oh, April, thank goodness," Mom said. "Can you help me with these curtains?" Eva picked them out, but they're so difficult to hang. I glanced at my sister, who didn't even look up from the TV. I placed the pie on the kitchen counter and went to help my mother. "Why didn't you ask Eva to help?" I whispered as I steadied the ladder. Mom sighed. "She's dealing with a lot right now." It took nearly an hour to hang the curtains properly. When we finished, I headed to the kitchen for a slice of pie before dinner. To my surprise, the pie dish was empty except for a few crumbs. "What happened to the pie?" I asked, knowing full well what had happened. Eva walked into the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Oh, that? The kids were hungry, so we gave them some. Then Richard had a piece. It was really good. You ate the entire pie? I made that for everyone, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You could have at least saved some for Mom and Dad, or me. Eva rolled her eyes. God, don't be so dramatic, it's just a pie. Besides, might do you some good to skip dessert anyway. She patted her flat stomach and glanced meaningfully at mine. That was it. In normal families, I said through clenched teeth, people share food. You offer it to everyone, especially the people whose house you're living in rent-free. Girls, please, Mom intervened, appearing from nowhere as she always did when we argued. Let's not fight over little things. I bit my tongue and just stared at Eva, who merely shrugged and walked away. Throughout dinner, I watched as Eva and Richard contributed nothing to the conversation except complaints about the neighborhood, the food, and pretty much everything else. My parents nodded along, desperate to keep the peace. As I drove home that night, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, I realized this couple of months was going to feel like an eternity. A week later, my phone rang during a meeting at work. April, it's Mom, she said, her voice strained. I hate to ask, but could you bring over some of that ointment for back pain? My back is killing me, and I can't get out of bed. I left work immediately and rushed to their house. I found Mom lying in bed, wincing with every movement. What happened? I asked as I applied the ointment to her back. After some hesitation, she admitted, we moved some furniture yesterday. Eva wanted to rearrange things to make more space for the kids. I stormed downstairs to find Eva, Richard, and the kids lounging in the living room, watching TV on a newly positioned entertainment center that must have weighed a ton. I marched over and switched off the TV. Hey, Richard protested. Are you out of your mind? I snapped at Eva. You had our parents moving heavy furniture while your husband sat on his ass? Mom can barely move now. Eva stood up, crossing her arms. Don't interfere in my relationship with Mom. She offered to help. And Richard was busy looking for work. Looking for work, I repeated flatly, glancing at the gaming headset next to his laptop. I turned back to Eva. This has to stop. Mom needs to rest for at least a week, no housework, no lifting, nothing. Then I faced Richard directly. And you, when exactly are you planning to get a job? Both of you? Richard puffed up his chest. I'm looking for something that matches my qualifications. I won't settle for just anything. I'm not working, Eva declared. I've never worked before, and I'm not starting now. I have the children to think about. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're not in a position to be picky. You're living off my elderly parents, making them move furniture, eating their food, using their electricity. You've become parasites. How dare you, Eva shrieked. April, Eva, that's enough, Mom called from upstairs, her voice weak but determined. I looked around at the rearranged living room, at Richard's expensive watch, at Eva's perfectly manicured nails, and I felt something snap inside me. This isn't over, I said, grabbing my purse. As I left, I slammed the door hard enough to rattle the new curtains Eva had made our mother hang. For a month, I didn't speak to my family. Not a call, not a text, nothing. I needed space to cool down, and frankly, I was tired of watching my parents let Eva walk all over them. Every time I thought about going back, I remembered the sight of my mother wincing in pain while Eva and Richard lounged like they were at a resort. But I couldn't avoid them forever. One evening, my phone rang with my mother's number. April, it's Mom, she said, her voice hesitant. I hate to bother you, but we need to talk about the bills. I got your money last week. It's not enough. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, not enough? It's always been enough. There was an uncomfortable pause. Well, the utility bills came in at $1,500 this month. I nearly dropped my phone. $1,500? That's more than double what it usually is. How is that even possible? Mom's voice grew small. Well, with Eva and the family, the kids leave lights on all night, Eva takes very long baths, and Richard is always on his computer or watching TV. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Mom, I agreed to help you and Dad. I never agreed to financially support Eva and her family. They're adults. They need to contribute. But the children? No, I cut her off. I'll send you the usual $600. That covers what you and Dad would use. The rest is on Eva and Richard. She hung up without saying goodbye. For 2 weeks, I stuck to my guns. But the guilt ate at me. Were my parents sitting in the dark to save electricity? Were they skipping meals to feed Eva's kids? The thought kept me up at night. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to my parents' house unannounced, using my key to let myself in. As I stepped inside, I heard yelling from the kitchen. I froze in the hallway, listening. "This is garbage," it was Eva's voice, shrill with anger. "Mom, you know we can't eat this cheap crap. We're used to quality food. Next time, I want you to get marbled beef and salmon, not this slop." Something inside me snapped. I stormed into the kitchen, finding Eva standing over our mother, who was shrinking back against the counter. Dad sat at the table, staring at his hands. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the room like ice. Eva spun around, surprised. "This doesn't concern you, April." "Like hell it doesn't. You have no right to yell at them like that. You don't pay for a single thing in this house. You don't get to demand expensive food when you're not bringing in a single dollar." Eva's face reddened. "My children can't eat this garbage she cooks." I stepped closer, my voice dangerously low. "Your children should eat whatever you can cook for them. And since you don't have money for groceries, I guess that means they'll go hungry. Maybe you should all check out the soup kitchens for the unemployed." Eva's face contorted with rage. Without another word, she stormed past me, bumping my shoulder hard, and slammed her bedroom door upstairs. I turned to my parents, who looked shell-shocked. "Why do you let her talk to you like that? This is your house." Mom wiped tears from her eyes. "She's under so much stress, April. They're still adjusting, we don't want to make things harder for her." "We're just trying to keep the peace," Dad added quietly, not meeting my eyes. In that moment, I realized that reasoning with my parents was useless. They loved Eva too much to stand up to her. If anything was going to change, I would have to be the one to make it happen. The next day, I made up my mind. If my parents wouldn't protect themselves, I would. I pulled out the business card Eva's mother-in-law had given me years ago, at their wedding. I'd kept it out of politeness, never thinking I'd actually use it. I dialed the number, rehearsing what I'd say. After 3 rings, a woman's crisp voice answered. "Hello, Diane Lancaster speaking." "Mrs. Lancaster?" "This is April, Eva's sister." There was a pause. "April, yes. Is everything all right? Has something happened to the grandchildren?" "The kids are fine," I assured her. "I'm actually calling about Eva and Richard." "I was wondering, why aren't you helping them?" "They're living with my elderly parents, claiming you refused to support them or let them stay with you." Another pause, longer this time. Then Diane Lancaster laughed. Not a humorous laugh, a bitter one. "April, we send them $3,000 every month. We've been paying your parents' utility bills, we just sent $1,500 last month. We offered to let them stay in our guest house, but they refused. And we gave them $10,000 when they said they needed to relocate." My mind raced, putting the pieces together. The expensive watch Richard still wore. Eva's salon fresh hair. The fact that they never seemed worried about money, despite supposedly being broke. "Mrs. Lancaster," I said slowly, "would you be willing to tell my parents exactly what you just told me? Maybe record it so they can hear it from you directly?" "Of course," she replied, concern in her voice. "What's going on over there?" I spent the next 15 minutes explaining everything, the yelling, the demands, the manipulation, By the end, Diane Lancaster was fuming. "I'll record something right away," she said firmly. "Those two have gone too far." That evening, I returned to my parents' house with the recording on my phone. I called everyone into the living room, saying I had an important family announcement. "What now?" Eva groaned, flopping onto the couch. Richard sat beside her, barely looking up from his phone. "I want everyone to listen to something," I said, pressing play. Diane Lancaster's clear voice filled the room. "This is Diane Lancaster, Richard's mother. I want to clarify that we have been supporting Richard and Eva financially throughout this difficult time. We send them $3,000 monthly, plus extra for utilities, including $1,500 last month for your parents' bills. We offered them our guest house, which they declined, and gave them $10,000 for relocation expenses. I'm troubled to hear they've claimed otherwise." The recording continued, but I was watching the faces around me. My parents looked shocked, then hurt, then angry. Eva's face drained of color. Richard stared at the floor, his jaw clenched. When it finished, there was dead silence. Then Eva exploded. "You vile snake," she screamed at me. "How dare you go behind our backs? Mom, Dad, you can't believe this. April's always been jealous of me, she's making this up." Dad, who had been quiet throughout this whole ordeal, suddenly slammed his fist on the coffee table so hard everyone jumped. "Enough," he roared, his face red with anger. I'd never seen him like this. "Eva, you and your family will leave this house immediately." Eva's strategy changed instantly. Tears appeared. "Daddy, you can't do this to me. We're your family." I said enough. Dad stood up, trembling with rage. "I've watched you abuse our hospitality, yell at your mother, make demands, and now I find out you've been lying to us? Taking our money when you had plenty? Out, now." Richard finally spoke up. "Sir, please, we just need a few days to." "You have hours, not days," Dad cut him off. "And you will pay us back every penny of the utilities you racked up." Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but one look at my father's face changed his mind. He pulled out his phone and made the transfer, then called movers. The next few hours were tense as they packed their things. Children cried, Eva alternated between tearful pleas and hateful glares, and Richard moved around like a man heading to his execution. As they stood on the doorstep with their suitcases, I couldn't resist one final jab. "By the way, Richard," I said coldly, "your parents send their regards. They also wanted me to tell you they won't be helping you anymore." Funny how actions have consequences, isn't it? The shock on their faces was almost worth all the drama. I slammed the door before they could respond. That night, I stayed over in my old bedroom. I lay awake for hours, thinking about Eva and our childhood. Had she always been this selfish, or had marriage to Richard changed her? Would she have turned out differently if our parents hadn't always given her everything she wanted? The next few weeks were difficult. Mom would sometimes start to mention Eva or the grandchildren, then stop herself mid-sentence, her eyes filling with tears. Dad would leave the room whenever the topic came close to arising. The wound was deep, too deep for quick healing. I visited more often, helping around the house, taking them shopping, making sure they were doing okay emotionally. Gradually, the painful silences became less frequent. We developed new routines and new topics of conversation. Dad joined a veterans coffee group at the local diner. Mom started taking water aerobics classes. Weeks turned into months. No one called from Eva's family. My parents never mentioned her name, and I didn't bring her up. It was as if she had been erased from our family history. Even the family photos featuring Eva seemed to disappear from the walls and shelves, put away in drawers or boxes where they wouldn't be a constant reminder. When I called to check on my parents, we talked about the weather, their activities, my work, politics, TV shows, anything but Eva. If my mother occasionally looked wistfully at children playing in the park when we went for walks, she never said why. If my father sometimes seemed lost in thought, staring at nothing, he never shared what was on his mind. One evening, about 3 months after the blow-up, Dad said something that surprised me. You know, he began hesitantly over dinner, I've been thinking about Eva's behavior. Mom and I both froze, forks halfway to our mouths. I think maybe we're partly to blame, he continued. We always gave her everything. Never made her work for anything. Never taught her values. Mom set her fork down. George, please, let's not. No, Helen, I need to say this, Dad's voice was firm. We failed her as parents. We raised her to be selfish. We raised both girls the same way, Mom argued weakly. Dad shook his head. No, we didn't. April had to fight for attention, Eva got it automatically. April had to earn things, Eva just had to ask. I didn't know what to say. It was true, but hearing my father acknowledge it out loud was shocking. It doesn't excuse what she did, Dad added. Nothing could excuse that. But maybe if we'd been different parents, she'd have been a different person. After that conversation, something shifted. The silence around Eva's name became less about pain and more about acceptance. We weren't avoiding the topic because it hurt too much, we simply had nothing more to say about her. She had made her choices, and we had made ours. A few months passed, and life settled into a comfortable pattern. I continued sending my parents $600 each month for utilities, visited them regularly, and watched as they built a life that no longer revolved around Eva's drama. My mother took up gardening with a passion I'd never seen before. She transformed their small backyard into a colorful paradise of flowers and vegetables. My father, always handy, started volunteering with Habitat for Humanity, helping build homes for families in need. Neither of them ever asked about Eva or her family. When we talked, it was about their new interests, my work, current events, normal family conversations that didn't include walking on eggshells or managing someone's outsized ego. Then one evening as I was working late, my phone rang with a familiar number. It was Diane Lancaster, Richard's mother. I sat up straighter, instantly alert. Mrs. Lancaster, is everything all right? Please, call me Diane, she said. And yes, everything is, well, as good as can be expected. I wanted to update you on what's happening with Richard and Eva. Oh, I tried to keep my voice neutral, unsure whether I wanted to hear this. Richard has called us for money several times, she said with a sigh. Last week, he actually asked if they could move in with us. We refused, of course. My husband told him straight out that we don't want to live with a fraudster and a liar. I'm sorry, I said automatically, though I wasn't sure who I was sorry for. Don't be, Diane replied firmly, it's what they deserve after everything they've done. But I thought you might want to know that they're managing. They both found jobs, nothing fancy, but it pays the bills. They've rented a small apartment, and they're living economically. I was silent for a moment, processing this. And the children? The children are fine, she assured me, we make sure of that. We don't give Richard and Eva money anymore, but we do pay for the children's school supplies and activities directly. They're not starving, and they're getting an education. Thank you for letting me know, I said sincerely. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, thinking about Eva's new life. The entitled princess, now working some ordinary job. The woman who'd never worked a day in her life, now punching a time clock like everyone else. It wasn't revenge, exactly, but there was a certain justice to it. The next day, I visited my parents and shared what Diane had told me. Richard asked his parents if they could move in, but they refused. They told him they didn't want to live with a fraudster and liar. Dad nodded grimly, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. They both have jobs now, I continued. Nothing special, but they're working. They have a small apartment. They're living on a budget, but they're getting by. And the children? Mom asked, her first direct question about the grandchildren in months. They're fine. Richard's parents are making sure they have what they need for school. They're not suffering. Mom visibly relaxed. Good, that's good to know. Does that mean you want to? I left the question hanging, not quite able to ask if they wanted to reconnect with Eva. No, Dad said firmly. We're glad the children are okay, but we have no interest in having Eva or Richard in our lives again. Some betrayals go too deep. Mom nodded in agreement. Your father's right, it's better this way. We have peace now. And they did. Their house was calm and organized again. No toys scattered everywhere, no yelling, no tension in the air. No one making demands or treating them like servants. No one lying to them. We settled into a standing Sunday dinner date. I'd come over, and we'd cook together, play cards, watch old movies. Simple family time, just the three of us. Sometimes I caught Mom looking at the empty fourth chair at the table, but she never mentioned Eva's name. The wound had scabbed over, not healed completely, but no longer bleeding. As for me, I never reached out to Eva, and she never contacted me. Sometimes I wondered how she was really doing, whether she'd actually changed or was just going through the motions until she could find another meal ticket. But mostly, I was content with the knowledge that she was no longer taking advantage of our parents. Was there a chance for reconciliation someday? Maybe. People change, or at least they can. But some trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. Only time would tell if Eva and I would ever speak again, or if my parents would ever want to see their eldest daughter. For now, we were all finding our way forward separately.